Welcome to the ZEN Hustlers Balance Podcast. My name is Jared Brake, the creator of ZEN Hustlers. What we do on this podcast is really support professionals by meeting people who walk the talk. Today, I get to interview one of my favorite people in Santa Cruz, where I live. He is a creator. He is a wonderful father. He is an intelligent businessman. He's a sharer, and he's one of the people in the community that really helps us culture and develop what we're doing here in Santa Cruz. So without further ado, Jay Brown, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Jared.
You're welcome.
Look forward to having this conversation. It's been a long time coming.
It's been a long time coming, and I think some reason there's about a timing in the universe,
Right.
and I never understand what it is, but there's always a reason and a time. Today's the day.
Yeah.
So Jay is the creator of Mindframe. He helps support other creatives and creators to explore their whole self so they can really provide a deeper impact with the work that they do. It's always hard to describe what you do because it's so holistic in nature. So how do you describe what you do?
So as creators, we all have visions.
Yeah.
And bringing those visions into reality is very often difficult. And the difficulty a lot of people have isn't necessarily how to do something. It's why they're doing it.
Okay.
And then the emotional ties and mechanisms that exist within us that prevent us from actually stepping into the things that we know we need to do.
Yeah.
And so I help people through the skill of like deeply understanding who they are on a multidimensional level. And then through that deep understanding, I help them see aspects of themselves that they're unable to see because it's hidden in their subconscious. And they get to see the mechanisms that stop them, the fears, the worries, the doubts, and then they get to see more of their talent, skills, and abilities. And when they have a deeper understanding of self, that clarity then gets expressed out into content. And so that's the other piece that I help people with is how to translate their vision in such a way that their audience can understand. And then when that relationship is built, that energetic experience that people have is ultimately what I believe is what makes life meaningful and fulfilling. And so I help people through that process of bringing their visions to life and then helping them understand the deeper aspects of themselves that may be preventing them and the deeper aspects of themselves that they can bring more online that will enable them to bring those visions forward.
I'm smiling as you're saying this because as you're saying this, I'm getting that that pull of the work that we've done together over the years of looking deeper, going below that surface level, really clarifying my mission of the why and the purpose. And so as you're saying it, I'm recalling all these memories of times you've spoken at the video creators course that we've done, the one-on-one you've done with me to help develop the water series for ZEN Hustlers. And so it's extracting some of those moments in me of like, like what is that deeper level? And there's so many layers to the onion. I feel like you're a chef. You're a creator chef and you're helping people get to that beautiful core. Wish there was something in the middle of the onion. Right? That was like this beautiful core, like almost pit seed. But then you've also, and the reason why I wanted to talk with you today is you've been through a real hustle journey.
Yeah.
You've written about it.
Yeah.
You create content around it almost weekly about, getting more connected to that core for yourself. Like, why am I doing this? What is my motivation? Without, where do you want to talk about that story? Because you've had a long history of that word hustle.
Yeah.
Who in the family taught you it?
Who in the family?
Where did you learn the hustle? Where did it come from?
Culture. Just observing people in my life.
Where was that?
I would say a large part of my hustle came from the sports world.
Okay.
Because that's where I rooted a lot of my identity
in sports.
I started at 4 years old playing t-ball, and then I played all of the sports, the tennis, volleyball, played a bit of soccer.
Yeah.
But the sports that I really stuck to were football, basketball, and baseball. I played those all throughout until high school.
Yeah.
And then took football into college, and I still play basketball today.
Yeah.
And so the hustle mentality is very much rooted in sports
For you.
for me.
Yeah.
And so that's where it really started.
Which isn't all bad. And we never say that the hustle's bad. It's just that balance. The hustle gives you energy, gives you productivity, gives you that feeling of completion. When did you start to realize that there was a downside of the hustle? When did that kick in for you?
This was later on in life, and I became an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So it's about 2005.
Okay.
And
20 years almost.
Yeah, almost 20 years ago. And my first business was a music licensing business where my friends who were musicians, I would take their music and put it into a catalog and then license that music for the background in major motion pictures and films, TV shows, video games, and whatnot. And then I transitioned from that into the event space, doing mostly club promotions, but various types of events. And it was during that time that I started to realize, like, oh, there's something that's really off, because I would have these really, really high highs, but then the pendulum always swings, and I would have the lowest of lows. And
what did that look like, the lows? Because it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
I want to get a little bit personal, if that's
no.
Because people are going through it.
Yeah.
They're living that low. We're in the high.
Yeah.
So let's just speak to that for a sec.
I will just share very vulnerably what that really looked like for me was infidelity in my relationship.
Thanks for sharing
that. I was married during that time while dating, and then eventually got married. And during that time, I really was deeply in love with this woman. Her name is Melissa. And at the same time, there were some unresolved emotions and trauma that I didn't realize was there, that when I wasn't on and having, really happy experiences, and I was feeling the anxiety, the stress, and the pressure of being a hustler, then I would go to my main coping mechanisms. And one of my main coping mechanisms was to connect with people, and mostly women, within the romantic realm. And I was in a monogamous relationship, which then, put me out of integrity. And so for me, that's when I started to realize, like, okay, like, this is not cool. I'm hiding. I'm doing things that are outside of the agreements of our relationship, which created a lot of pain, a lot of suffering for both myself and my partner at the time. And I didn't understand it. I didn't understand the pull of wanting to connect with women outside of my relationship. It was so compelling to me. And that's really where I started to ask myself the questions, like, why am I doing this? Why do I even feel a need when I have this beautiful, amazing woman, like, as my partner?
Yeah. How was your energies as far as energy levels?
Very stressful, but at the same time, there were some peak states, and those peak states came during those experiences where I would achieve. And one of my biggest achievements during that time was working with Beyonce. And when that happened for me, I felt like I was on top of the world. Working with one of the biggest entertainers of our time. So I hit that peak, but then very shortly after that, maybe a week or so after that, I felt incredibly depressed. And so my energy levels would wane,
spike,
and then, I would do what many people would do in terms of coping, as I shared before, interacting, with women, and then the drugs, the alcohol, all those things became coping mechanisms for me.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, because it's often that we have this goal, we attain it, and we have no idea what's on the other side of the mountain. And you just start tumbling down. And was there not the direction to say, well, okay, I had this peak experience, I'm going to go higher next time? Or were you just lacking clarity on what that looked like?
Yeah, I would definitely try to maintain where I was and then, go bigger, which it did happen. Shortly after that, started working with Jamie Foxx and other, celebrities. And so I started to move into that realm, and it just kept doing the same thing, like really high, really low, really high, really low.
Yeah.
And I thought at that time, okay, well, I guess this is just normal. This is just how life is. And I didn't know any better, that it didn't have to be that way. And then I started to realize, like, is this really the life that I want to live?
Yeah.
And I decided, no, it's not the life that I wanted to live, because, behind the scenes, I was experiencing a lot of pain and suffering, but not something that I would share openly.
Did you have a community? Did you have people you could talk to about this?
Yes, I did. My close friends at the time, I would share, what was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But not a really deep community, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
There was, a lot of superficiality in my life at the time. And so a lot of the advice that I would get, looking back now, was not very healthy advice.
Okay.
Not from a place of higher state of consciousness.
Yeah.
Let's just say very canned, I would say, solutions to the problem that I was having. And, I would try different things that people would share with me, but to no avail.
So where was the aha moment? When did it kind of pop for you?
So Melissa, who I spoke about earlier, who I was married to at that time, we were both dabbling in personal growth and spirituality. Well, more her on the spirituality side. And at that time, I didn't believe in anything that was in the unseen. I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe in Jesus. I didn't believe in any religions. Grew up in a household, in a Catholic household.
Okay.
And because of the struggle that I was going through, I just said to myself, I'm like, if I can't see it, then I was not going to believe it at all whatsoever. And so Melissa at the time booked us for this retreat out in Sedona, Arizona, where I met my now mentor. His name is Dr. Victor Vernon Wolf, and he created a modality called holodynamics. And it's a study of all the sciences, HOLO dynamics. And so he studied all of the major sciences and then combined the philosophies within those sciences to create his own modality that encompassed all of them. And during that workshop, he shared the scientific evidence behind things that we can't see, feel, or touch, the world of the unseen. And I had a few experiences that were achieved through various meditations and mindfulness exercises.
Was there any medicine involved?
No medicines involved, which is, what I really appreciated about the experience. And it just blew my mind that I couldn't understand some of the things, not as I do now.
Yeah.
But I just knew viscerally in my body, I could feel this is right. What he's sharing with us. And he was showing the scientific evidence behind
really kind of suited your other side.
Oh, yeah. I need the evidence.
Yeah.
And he was showing all of the evidence that my brain needed to know and see to keep me open to the information. And so it was at that time that I was like, okay, I need to go down this path. I need to go deep down this path. And he was very integral guide in my life to open me up to things that would help me in terms of my own suffering, my trauma.
Big gratitude.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing that one person, one experience can just have that pivotal shift?
Yeah, I'm so thankful to him. And, what's interesting is that this modality that he created was an integral piece in ending the Cold War. He had gone to Russia during that time, met with the leaders of Russia, and used this modality to help them understand their motivations behind war. And once they understood it at a deeper level, what was driving them to want to go to war, they decided like, oh, that's not actually what we want to do. And there were people in Russia at that time that didn't like that.
Yeah.
And so he was doing events, live events, and at the end of the events, he would do meet and greets. And during a meet and greet, he felt this prick in his body. Come to find out, he had been injected with uranium amongst other substances, let's just call it. And for most people, they would die within a year's time.
Was he poisoned? Someone was trying to poison him?
Yeah. Okay. They tried to poison him.
Okay.
And it took him 7 years to transform the chemical compounds in his body so that they could actually exit his body. He healed himself, and we were the first class and workshop that he taught after he had healed himself.
Wow.
So I felt it was just like evolution, things that were destined for us. And I was meant to be in that workshop for 14 days, studying what I got to study, and it had created a foundation for the life I live today.
Wow. Do you still refer people and clients to that work?
Absolutely. I've got to talk about it all the time. It's a big piece of the work that I do.
Is he still alive?
Yeah. Still alive.
Teaching it?
In his mid-80s, I think, and still teaching it. He's such youthfulness at this age of his life now, but I attribute that to his mindset and how he approaches life and how he navigates the world of his own emotional roller coasters as a human being.
Yeah. I was reading one of your posts on Mindframe about unsubscribing from the hustle culture and the hustle mindset and what it looked like when you were in hustle mode and what it looks like afterwards. So what are some things that you do that help you stay in connected, contact with that on a daily basis? What are some practices that you do personally?
Just in contact with
just like either recognizing when you're in hustle or the daily practices that you've implemented to keep your balance.
Yeah, a big one is monitoring my stress levels.
Okay. What causes you stress?
Various things.
You have stress issues in this modern life?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm human, so
shocking. Yeah.
In our human experience, I look at stress as the check engine light.
Yeah. I like that.
You know how in cars we have check engine lights.
Something's up.
That helps us to, identify that there's something that needs to be looked at before it breaks down. Hopefully, right? So stress for us in the human experience is what I see as the check engine light.
Yeah.
And so for me, that is just really telling us as human beings that we are out of alignment with what our soul desires.
Mm-hmm.
And the further away we are from doing what our soul's purpose is, the more stress that we will feel.
Interesting.
So the answer to that question, one of the things that I do is I monitor my stress levels. If I'm feeling stressed, then I ask myself, okay, what am I doing right now that is not in alignment with what my authentic self, my soul, truly wants for me and for my life? And, then through that, I ask myself, what are the ideas that I've subscribed to?
The programming.
The programming.
Yeah.
And then I do the work to get to the root of where those beliefs have come from, tracking them back usually to childhood.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
That's what I was asking you. Who taught you some of this?
Yeah.
Who had a bigger influence on you?
Yeah.
Who's in your head when you think back, speaking to you?
Well, definitely, the experiences with my mother and father.
Yeah.
Very often the voice that speak to us, in our minds is the voice that was cultivated through the experiences that we've had with our main caretakers, because it's not always necessarily for some people their mother or father.
Yeah.
A lot of those times it is.
Yeah.
And for me, it was my mother and father. And so those voices and that internal dialogue, I call them the mechanisms. And some of them, now that I have been doing this work for the length of time I've been doing it, may not even come from influences that are on this plane of reality.
Okay.
I've realized now that there is an intelligence, let's just say, that has been around long before you and I even arrived to this plane.
Mm-hmm.
And they have an intelligence that can move through consciousness, through human beings, and influence the way in which we think and believe. And so tracking those and connecting with people who understand how to track those intelligences is an important part of my work.
Yeah.
And I know, for some that may sound like very
well, I want to bring you back to who you were before you did the holo experience, because you needed evidential proof.
Yeah.
You weren't going to believe in something until you had the proof. You had to see something.
Yeah.
So now looking at that, how do you play devil's advocate with this now? I'm having fun with this. Yeah. I'm remembering you needed that. Yeah. And I'm sure there's people out there who need that.
Yeah.
So where do they go to for that concreteness that they want to hold on to, for that security?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be different for everyone.
Yeah.
It's going to be different for everyone. They really have to connect with their inner voice and inner guidance. And I did that when, Melissa had invited me to go to this workshop.
Yeah.
Do I really want to do this? And I had my back and forth.
Yes.
Many people do when they get introduced to things that are completely outside of the realm of what they think is possible in life. And I think at the same time, something like that comes into your life, open your eyes and open your heart, because that might be the medicine that you've been looking for to achieve the thing that you want to achieve, or have the peace that you want to have in your life. Yeah. And so that's what I would say to people that, may not believe in these types of things, or conspiracy theories are, so prevalent in our world today. Yeah. Follow your feeling.
Okay.
Follow your feeling. Because for me, there's nothing more concrete than when my body speaks to me and I can feel the energy and the lightness and the excitement that comes when something is introduced to me, versus the constriction and, the feeling of like, ooh, like that's not the vibe.
Yeah.
That's not the vibe. So I need to...
Do you feel more like instinctual gut? Do you feel heart, or is it different for each time?
It's different.
Yeah.
It activates, I would say, in various parts of my body, sometimes in my head, sometimes, right in the heart area. Sometimes it's a whole body thing. And so just slowing down, which goes back to the, hustler mentality and deriving from that, because what I recognize is that in our culture and our society, we're conditioned to move very quickly from one thing to the next, and to stay in the doing. And when we're in the doing, we activate the aspects of ourselves that pulls us away from that internal guidance system. And if you don't take the time, it's like practicing a jump shot in basketball. If you don't take time to cultivate that internal guidance system, you'll lose it. Yeah. You'll lose connection to it. And then you'll have to rely on your mind, which is not very reliable in certain situations, in most situations, actually, I would say, now that I have played with this for quite a while. And so slowing down, creating the space to listen to that internal voice or that internal guidance system is an integral piece to really being in alignment with your soul's purpose and what you're meant to do, that will create that level of fulfillment and meaningfulness that I think most people are looking for in their lives.
Then do you do that as a self-practice alone? Do you write? Like, how do you process that experience now? It doesn't have to be all the same way, but just trying to learn a little bit about your practice and the way that you do it. So quietly, you're meditating. Like, how do you
Yeah.
experience those?
Yeah, there's multiple avenues that I go down.
Yeah.
One of those avenues is by having conversations with my partner, who is very well practiced. Her name is Nora. She's very well practiced in esoteric psychology, amongst other things. She, like myself, has gone down this road of wanting to free ourselves from the mechanisms that keep us from operating authentically as who we are, and those aspects of ourselves that keep us disconnected from that intelligence that animates all of life. And so we often have conversations that usually come as a result of conflict.
Okay.
Conflict is such a great tool for discovering and identifying the programming and the mechanisms that keep us from being truly connected with that internal guidance system that we all have. And so when conflict happens in my life, I start asking myself a lot of questions. Why is that conflict happening in my life? And what is at the root within myself that called that conflict forward? Because I believe all that we experience externally is a manifestation of what's inside of us, how we think, what we're thinking about, how we're feeling at any given moment. The world that we experience outside of us is a manifestation of that internal landscape. And so when conflict arises, I'll have conversations with my partner. She'll ask me questions. There's a lot of,
it's a healthy inquiry and a healthy dynamic. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, it comes with struggles and types, because for human beings that, they're still the blame and, like when we're triggered and not being nice to each other, usually that doesn't last very long.
Yeah.
Because we notice it and we're really good.
There's efficiency there.
Yeah. Because that stuff is so deeply ingrained in our culture and our society to want to attack the people that are in the experience that we're in when we feel triggered. Because we think the root of that trigger is whatever that person did, said, or how they're acting, or it's something they wrote. We think it's them that caused us the pain and the feeling that we're experiencing, but in actuality, they're our growth partners, and they're there to help us identify what's underneath the trigger that caused us to feel the way that we feel. So that's one of the avenues I go down.
And this is always interesting to me because it reminds me of the monk in the cave. The story is the monk goes to the cave, he spends years in the cave, and he feels enlightened. And the moment that he walks down the mountain into the village, someone says something to him and he gets really angry. And he's like, damn it. He goes back up to the cave to meditate because there's only so much you can do alone. Until you're engaging with other humans as we're meant to be, social beings, that's when conflict comes up and challenges come up. And we have to navigate. And it's not that person doing that thing. It's that internal reaction of like, why am I reacting to this? So I love when people are in great partnerships, and it's such a good model. And I love when I see you and Nora engaging, because I know there's like that deeper root of like, how is that working? Because there's just not a lot of good examples for us out in the culture of great relationships. It's like, this is what it could look like. And I'm not putting it on a pedestal, but it's like, it's really nice to hear that some are like really generative and growth mindset. So yeah,
it is. I've grown so much in this relationship. It's been 4 years, and I feel like who I was 4 years ago before I entered this relationship feels like a completely different person. Than who I am today. And it's a really, really great metric for this experience. And the one thing that really, I believe, led to the experiences that we've had in terms of our growth is making this agreement that we're not in this relationship to fall in love and to get married and to, do the traditional thing that people do or are taught, I should say, about relationships. We decided that our relationship is going to be a container for us to free ourselves. That is what we committed to. That is the reason why we're in this relationship. It's not, to be with each other forever until, it's
Daughter time.
we don't know. We have no fucking control
Yeah.
over where our relationship is going to be.
Yeah.
We're here to witness and to observe all the various aspects of ourselves as they show up in the relationship. And then we go through the process of just asking ourselves, like, why did I show up that way? Why is this coming up? And because we committed to that, that's what we're getting. We're getting opportunities to free ourselves from those
That's really
internal mechanisms.
That's really beautiful, because I think a lot of us are going into relationships for the wrong reasons, and we're trying to help that hole be filled.
Oh.
And that's a really beautiful intention that you guys have. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, it's it's hard to say anything is wrong, because for me, if we go into something, it's for a good reason.
Yeah,
and life sets us up, for really great learning opportunities. We just have to look at it that way, because I've had an experience of many mistakes, let's say, in my life, and I've made choices that I would look back at and say, "The hell was I doing?" And I chose the wrong thing, and how my dad raised me, I could say was wrong, but it's inspired me to do the work that I'm doing today. And if I didn't go through those experiences, would I still be on the path that I'm on today?
Yeah.
And the relationships that I had before that were based on, these idealistic ways of relating to one another and ideas that, were conditioned through society, I appreciate them because they give me the contrast now to look at the current relationship that I'm in. I'm like, oh yeah, I really appreciate the relationship that I'm in right now, because the relationships I had in the past were just not the business for me. And I have clarity now as a result of it.
Yeah. So that's one way you speak to your partner. What are some other things that you do?
So one of the things that have become a really important practice for me is getting into my body. And some people call this, or a large body of people call this somatic training and exercises. And so getting into my body through playing sports.
Yeah.
So basketball is like my church.
Yeah.
I call it. So playing basketball, even hitting a baseball, gets me out of my mind to stop thinking about things. Because
does it have to be a game, or can you play on your own?
On my own.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't have to be with other people. I actually prefer not being with other people when I'm playing certain sports. The whole goal of it is to get into my body and get out of my mind, and to stop the rumination of
the mind.
Things, because that's, very often where we go when we want to understand or try to solve a problem, is like, let me think about it. And what I realized is like, no, that actually doesn't work very well. And what works very well is to clear ourselves and become vessels for universal intelligence to flow through us. And in order to do that, we have to get out of our minds, the neocortex aspect of the brain, so that we can let that intelligence actually flow through us. When I say that, the thought that comes to me, it's always flowing through us. It's just whether we are able to access that intelligence or not. And so one way that I access that intelligence is by getting into my body through sports. And I took up archery recently, actually, and that's one very effective way, because you can't be thinking too much when you have, an arrow that can kill things.
Yeah.
Shooting guns is probably another one. If I took that up, I would imagine that you don't want to be
hyper-present.
Yeah. Anything that brings you into hyper-presence, I think that's a great way to describe it. And so when the baseball's coming at
you're not thinking about
5 miles an hour.
No, you're not thinking about anything else.
Well, man, how do I do this one problem that I have in my life right now? How do I navigate it? No, you're be present, because that baseball.
It reminds me of flow science, of being, time dilates. And you're not in your headspace, you're in your body flow, and you're really connected to source energy and presence. And that's where you're going to get insights.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And art is a great one.
And art. What type of art do you do?
So filmmaking is my main modality, I would say. I paint sometimes too, because I have a daughter, 8 years old, and she likes to paint. And so we sit down and we paint things. And one thing that I really want to get back into that I used to do when I was younger was build models. So, ships, planes and things like that. I would go in such great detail. Like you wouldn't see 1 ounce of glue on any of the models that I created, because so precise with it. But that level of presence from being so precise is what took me out of the mental mind state and into the hyper presence.
Yeah, I was drawing as a kid, and I would spend hours and hours drawing, and just lost in.
What did you draw?
It was mostly characters.
Okay.
Yeah, I did a lot of character-based things and little stories, and it's sweet now because now I have 2 sons, and I've given them to them, and I've given them my drawings because I don't really, they don't, it's fun to see, but they really appreciate them now, and they're learning how to draw, and so, it's sweet. I've just spent hours and hours.
You still draw?
I do sometimes, not as much as I'd probably like. I think it's interesting because there's these things we do as a child that are playtime, and we don't allow ourselves to have playtime as adults. And I think that's where procrastination comes in, and laziness, because we want to do those things. We just don't give ourselves permission or access to and they're new. I'm in my 40s. That's not what I needed when I was a child. So does drawing still do it for me? Maybe not. So I'm finding new ways to play as an adult. And that's what's beautiful about having children. That's what I was going to ask you is what is the fathership journey giving you access and insight into? Because I've found deep insight just becoming a father.
Yeah. Well, that brings up a lot for me right now, because last night I had an episode. I taught her.
I did too. That's interesting. Yeah.
That
didn't go great.
No.
Yeah.
And I'm still processing it. It's still really heavy on my heart. And that would be the answer to the question, is that what I really appreciate about my relationship with my daughter is she brings out the best and the worst of me.
Yeah.
And I saw, some of my worst last night that I thought I had resolved in terms of, the work that I've been doing to mitigate against those things that I see that cause me pain and suffering, and that would cause her pain and suffering. And so,
how old is she now?
She's 8 now.
Okay.
Yeah. And so to have that experience on one end, it is really, really hard and really, really difficult, because it brings up so much emotionally. At the same time, I see it as a great opportunity, because then I know that's where I'm going to focus my attention.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going to focus my time, so that, when I do that work to identify what was at the root that took me out of balance and took me out of being in my heart, that's where the gold is at.
Yeah.
Because it sits so deep in our subconscious sometimes that, we don't know it still has an influence on us until those moments of conflict and struggle and strife. And so, pain is such a great activator for growth. And, I'm feeling it right now in my life through this experience that I had with my daughter. And this is what I appreciate about the experience that I have as a father.
Similar to your partner, will you and your daughter have conversations that really help you change things? Yeah. What does that look like?
Conversations with an 8-year-old is different from conversations with a 37-year-old. And what I really appreciate about those conversations with my daughter is that they have to be taking complex philosophies and ways of doing life and being able to simplify them so that they can be grasped and understood by an 8-year-old is such a challenging thing to do, especially when you're talking.
And we're not trained to do it.
to not have that training or guidebook
Yeah.
of how to have these conversations is a problem I see, you know, and so I just intuitively tried to guide myself through these conversations and to simplify them so that she can understand them is part of the whole process.
Yeah.
And then how do I model them, you know, to her instead of just trying to tell her what to do? How am I showing her what to do? So I often think about, okay, what's the best way to actually model this and fully embody it? Because she's going to think it's bullshit if I'm telling her you should be doing this and I'm doing the complete opposite, right? Which is often a big problem in parenting is we're telling our kids, you need to do this thing.
They're not seeing it.
We're not actually doing the thing that we're telling them to do. Then you're going to be like, no, I'm not going to do that thing because you're not doing it. But they're going to do the thing that you've been doing. And so
they're moving all the time.
Yeah.
It's hard having that.
Such a great mirror. Such a great mirror.
I'm going through a different experience because my 14-year-old is pulling away as he normally does, spending more time with friends.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm reaching for that connectedness. And he's pulling back and I'm reaching in. And it's like that dynamic of like, how do we just come together in this fun space? So we want to do something enjoyable and learn together and have fun together. And while he's pulling one way and I'm leaning in. And so if I wait for him, sometimes that's the best way. But sometimes I don't want to just wait for him to lean in. So it's an interesting dynamic having a teenager coming out of, you know, younger children who need you. And they need you less. And they do need you less. Like they are becoming very independent. They do need you less. And so figuring out that balance point of like, okay, where am I needed? How do we still engage? How do we communicate that? Because they shut down verbally too. It's like there's an on and off switch. They get loud or they get quiet. There's very little middle.
So yeah, up for you.
Well, the first thought is I think back to what I was like, which is hard. Actually hard to think back that far. Of like, what was I going through? Because we're flooded with chemicals. We're flooded with different things at that time. I think back to the way I related to my parents, but I think that's not as relevant because I'm raising them in a different way. I'm raising them in a much more conscious way. And you had mentioned a book. One of the books I use is Dr. Shefali's Conscious Parenting around what is it in me, similar to what you were saying, that's triggered or challenged right now. And why am I kind of bringing that up? Because it's my thing. It's not his thing. He's fine. So how do I just be kind of open to him in that moment of like, hey, what are you going through? How can I support you? And how can we have fun together and still engage without just an isolation? So it's new. I'm definitely a new. You go from all these stages as a parent, a toddler, and then the middle years, and then the teenage years, and then they get older and move out. And there's that dynamic. And so one of the things I do, it sounds silly, is I'm counting backwards from when he becomes 18. Instead of counting up, I'm counting down. So he's 14. So I've got 4 years to have something still special. And it'll still be special after that, but I'm counting downwards. And that helps me have more humbleness and appreciation and gratitude. Because it's finite. It's not infinite. And it helps me get back into that moment of like, man, I'm going to miss these days. And so don't miss them. Just be in the moment right now and enjoy them while you're here. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Counting down. Because you think you have so much time.
Yeah. And I've lost 2 friends my age. I've lost 2 fathers in the last few years. And it really drove home of like, oh, this body is not forever. Yeah. And that moment as the father, the parent, the partner, it is not a guarantee. None of it's guaranteed. And that's really helped. The sad part is obviously terribly sad to lose friends our age. But that insight is like, it's gold. It's a golden insight of like this little thing called life ain't guaranteed. You don't know how it's going to go. We don't know what they're going to do. We don't know how we're going to react and what we're going to do in our lives. So it makes it precious. And it's a gift to get that time. And if I can get into that space, it's a totally different dynamic. Yeah. If I get into the dad space and I need this and I want to do this, and it just kind of breaks down.
Sorry for any loss when the death is such a powerful teacher.
Yeah.
As we've heard. And so I'm happy to hear that it's giving you this perspective. I think a lot of us lose because life can move so fast. And there's so many distractions that keep us from really keeping focused on the things that really truly matter. And, you know, when you're putting your focus and attention on that.
Yeah, I'm glad I don't think about it all the time, but it was really two good teachers over the last few years of like people my age, very healthy, very outdoorsy, just gone. Yeah.
Never know. That's the thing.
Never know.
Yeah.
And then to watch the impact on their families and their spouses and their widowed people in their lives. That impact is intense. That's an intense impact because you see the holidays and the birthdays and the vacations where that person's gone.
Yeah.
And there's just this big hole left and them trying to fill it with different things. So getting a little emotional about it because when I really get into that space and I think about it, it's such a powerful teacher of like that present moment of like, stay present. And then I can laugh at myself. I can stop taking myself so seriously and I can be more present with them, just have fun and be light. And it's less fun. It's more lightness. There's a less of like a need to do something and a lightness. I'm like, okay, let's try it your way. Let's try it this way. Let's see where this goes instead of me pretending to know. Yeah.
And being attached to a certain.
And being attached to it. Yeah. So we're coming up on the end here and I just wanted to go over some, what are some day-to-day stuff you do? Like just walk us through like a day.
Walk you through a day.
Of like practices, habits.
You know, something that has become a really important practice for me is training my airway.
Okay.
And it's become an important practice because, you know, realizing that when we're born, first thing we do is breathe.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Point.
Yeah.
And this is something that we're going to do thousands of times every single day until it's time for us to cross the plane.
Yeah.
And I never thought of it from the perspective that I do now, which is that I spend so much time training from the neck down because that's what I've been trained to do as an athlete, right? So, you know, making sure my muscles are strong and that, you know, I'm flexible and all these other aspects of, you know, being an athlete. And I never really thought of it like training from the neck up. And of course, our airway isn't just relegated to, you know, that part of the body, but the breath is so important on so many levels, you know, in terms of creating balance and coherence, which is the scientific term that's used to describe internal harmony. And so training my airway has become a very important practice of mine because I didn't realize that I actually had a deconditioned airway. And the result of that was a pause in my breathing many times during sleep.
Okay.
And, you know, it's insignificant in the moment where you stop breathing for a second or two, but that compounded over time, over many years, leads to some really unintended consequences of dis-ease, like dementia, autoimmune diseases, because obviously our cells need oxygen to metabolize proteins and carbohydrates and fats and all those different things. But if we're not actually intaking oxygen at the highest levels, then our cells suffer. And if our cells suffer, obviously that's a problem.
Yeah.
And during our sleep, this is the time where we recover and regenerate. And if the airway is deconditioned, which because of the convenience that we've created since the Industrial Revolution, most people have deconditioned airways, which leads to sleep apnea, snoring, like all these different things that are results of a deconditioned airway. And then when you're sleeping and you're not getting enough oxygen, you're going to wake up tired. And then when you wake up tired, you're going to go to the coffee, you're going to go to the energy, it's like, it has that impact. And most importantly for me, it has an impact on our ability to regulate our emotions and our ability to connect to that intelligence. Because if you're not in balance internally, it's going to be difficult for you to create balance externally. And so training the airway, training the breath,
How did you do that? Did you do a book or a course?
One of my clients had reversed his own sleep apnea.
Wow.
That he had for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
And so then, he's like, how do I automate this so I can share it with more people?
Yeah.
And so he came to me and we started developing this course. And as part of that whole process, of course, I needed to learn what it is.
The beauty of working with
to be able to
impressive clients. Right?
It's like, I felt so blessed to be able to learn this stuff.
Yeah.
And realize, like, even though I felt healthy for the most part, I came to this realization, like, like, my breathing sucks.
Yeah.
I'm like,
as you're saying it, all I get to do is constantly think about how I'm breathing. It's so funny. It's like, as you're saying, it's like, oh man, I really want.
And then one of my friends the other day, she was on a flight, to the East Coast, and she sends me all these pictures of people mouth breathing, because that's one of the consequences of a deconditioned airway.
Yeah.
If you breathe through your mouth, you're not going to get the highest levels of oxygenation from mouth breathing, and it causes so many ailments like bad breath and cavities and all these other things.
Yeah.
So that's one of the practices that.
And is that nighttime, daytime? When do you do that? Anytime.
Anytime, which is cool because it's only like when I'm driving, I'll do all these exercise. It only takes like 5 minutes, and I have balloons that I blow.
Okay, well maybe we could put a link to some of that work.
Yeah.
Follow up. Yeah.
I think it's so important for emotional regulation. Again, internal balance, amongst other things. Like now on the court, I could run forever. I'm 45 years old playing, with 20 and 30-year-olds, but I'm the one that can run up and down.
Really?
Or like
proofs in the pudding.
The pudding, and I love it, man. So that's a big thing.
That's awesome.
In my life.
We're wrapping up. So what's one imparting thing that people can take away? We've covered a lot of topics. What's something that's like a mantra or the last 2 cents in a way for you of like, what's something that's your guiding light and you say to yourself that other people might resonate with?
Is my heart open?
Is my heart open?
Yeah. I check in every day and I ask myself, am I open-hearted in this moment? And anytime we close our hearts, there are multiple things that will happen to you in that. Is number one, on the physical level, when you close your heart, there's energy that's flowing through us all day long. The amount of energy that we are able to receive is dependent on whether our hearts are open or not. And so if we close our hearts, a lot of times it's being done that way because it's been trained as a protection mechanism to protect us from the people that we think are the cause of the pain that we are experiencing. And yes, that can be effective on one level, but on a very physical level, when you close your heart, that energy that flows through you gets strained.
Yeah.
And this is why a lot of people, when they close their hearts, they feel that draining, feeling from doing so. But the other consequence of that is non-physical is your intelligence. Your level of intelligence actually decreases when you close your heart, because you are closing your heart to the intelligence that created you, that pumps your blood, that makes your heart beat, that allows you to breathe without thinking about it. That whole intelligence that operates your entire being now doesn't flow through you at the highest levels when you close your heart. And so that's how I look at it, and why I ask myself on a daily basis, is my heart open right now? Because physically, of course, I want to feel strong. I want to feel healthy. I want to feel at peace. And in order to do that, being open-hearted is important. And it's such a hard thing to do in this day of age, because there's so many things that cause us to want to close our hearts, like wars that are happening right now, and, what's in the news. And so that's like my mantra every day, because I know if I have my heart open, I'm receiving intelligence that will guide me into everything that I need to live my life meaningfully, to enjoy it, to be fulfilled, and to experience it at the highest levels. But when my heart is closed, I can tell, because pain and suffering is what will result. It's just reflected back to you as a mirror. Like, yeah, that's what happens when you close your heart. So that's my thing.
Well, I want to thank you because I think we got a really nice amount of your heart open and that flow coming through you today to share everything you've done. So thank you. Your experience is really valuable to everyone who's hearing it. So
thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. So if you or anyone you know is experiencing some of the things we've talked about today, when you know you're out of sync, when you're out of balance, when you don't, it's not sleeping well, can't take deep breaths, feeling low energy. There's so many different ways it shows up in your life. These are some of the practices you can do. We'll put links to your work with Mindframe so that people can see the work that you do in the world. I think that's really deeply aligned with what you've spoken about today, is why I've always appreciated our conversations. So yeah, if any of this resonates with you, feel free to reach out to us and put you in touch with Jay. And Zen Hustlers has always been about a resource community to help support you on your journey, wherever you're going in the world, whatever's real for you, whatever you're seeking to have that impact and that balance, what we call balance on the edge, so that you know that you're having a really fulfilling life. So thanks for watching today. And thanks to our guest, Jay Brown. And get out there, live well, and take care of yourself. Thanks. All right, my man. That was awesome. Thank you so much.
That was fun.
I love doing this.